Well, thank you, John, for that introduction, and I'm sure we all benefited from listening with care to the newly elected president of Cyprus, who has opened this conference. And I have to say that I had a feeling of great nostalgia when I saw him appear on the screen, because he was standing in front of the cabinet table in the presidential palace in Nicosia, where I sat for many long hours discussing the Cyprus problem with Glafkos Clerides and his government. Though I have to say that the more useful discussions took place on Glafkos's boat rather than around that table. And before I start, I could just like to emphasize, since Cyprus is one of those places which is the home for conspiracy theories, that I am not speaking on behalf of the British government, for whom I have not worked since I stood down as Special Representative for Cyprus in 2003, and I have not had any contact with them, and the thoughts that I will put out on the table are not those of the British government, believe it or not. So at the time when I agreed to speak to this conference on the geopolitics of the region following the elections in Greece, Turkey, and indeed in Cyprus, it was reasonable to entertain the possibility that the two elections which remained to be held, because President Christodoulides, whom we've heard already, had already by then been elected as the new president of Cyprus, it was possible to believe that those two remaining elections might result in a change of leadership and government, which could have opened up some hitherto unexplored avenues in handling the dangerously deadlocked situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. That, of course, is no longer so, with President Erdogan elected to a further term of office, and with a parliamentary majority, and with the Mitsotakis New Democracy government in Greece apparently cruising towards a new term in the second election at the end of this month. So it would be pretty foolhardy to attempt at this stage to predict the policy path these three critical regional players will take in the period ahead. It's best, in any case, to judge leaders and governments by what they do as much as by what they say. So I will focus on posing questions rather than trying to answer them, which may be a bit frustrating for you, but I hope not too much. Let's start with energy and the issue of energy security, which has become such a burning one for all Europeans since Russia invaded Ukraine and supplies of Russian gas and oil were phased out. The least one can say about the precarious standoff over the exploration, development, and transmission of the gas reserves in the Eastern Mediterranean, and in particular those in the waters around Cyprus, is that it is not helping to resolve Europe's energy security predicament and the need to diversify those gas supplies. And there is also clearly a potential opportunity in those circumstances for Cyprus to benefit both commercially and politically from helping to meet those needs, particularly if that can be done reasonably quickly and reasonably economically, which could point towards transmission through the already existing Turkish pipeline system with Europe. Will those possibilities be seriously explored in the by the newly elected governments in ways which take account of the strongly held positions of each, but find compromises which do not prejudice those strongly held positions? Not easy, but in the new energy supply environment, perhaps worth exploring. And I should say that, if accused of naivety, my own experience of 7 years dealing with the Cyprus problem was, alas, that politics always trumped economics. I think it's time that economics and politics were brought into line. So much for energy. Next, look at the possible extension of the EU-Turkey customs union for trade in goods to cover trade in services and perhaps agricultural goods. That possibility is already being explored. Cyprus, as we all know, and this conference bears testimony to it, is a strong player in services and has much to gain from preferential access to Turkey's large and growing market. But currently, thanks to a misguided decision by Turkey's government many years ago, Cyprus does not, in practice, benefit from that customs union, whether it is extended or whether it is not extended. Is that an issue that newly elected leaders will find worth revisiting? Is it one where a way can be found round the thicket of legal objections? And then there is the issue of migration, always a hot topic, and never more so than now. We heard on the news today that the European Union has just agreed a new policy on migration, which has probably quite far-reaching consequences, some of which will be felt in the region that includes Cyprus and around it. The EU-Turkey arrangements for helping Turkey manage the burden of millions of refugees from Syria and elsewhere in the Middle East and further come up for review, obviously, on a regular basis. Whatever one may think about the Arab League's decision to welcome President Assad back into its fold, that is unlikely to tempt back many of those who fled from his rule in the first place. And any attempt by Turkey to repatriate them forcibly would not only be contrary to the UN Refugee Convention, but would also be likely to trigger a further substantial exodus of those refugees to destinations, dare I say it, further west. And when I did geography, Cyprus is west of Turkey. And will a way be found to avoid such outcomes, to avoid Europe's difficulties in coping with even the present level of immigration becoming even worse in the period ahead? Good question, not answered. Now, I've so far avoided mentioning the Cyprus problem in these remarks, not because it doesn't underlie all the other topics. It does. I've referred to them. But because so long as the governments of Turkey and of the TRNC insist as a precondition of any resumption of UN-led negotiations for a settlement on acceptance that would be based on a two-state solution, I see no prospect for progress. The words two-state solution may sound seductive, but this flies in the face of every UN Security Council resolution adopted over many decades. So I fear it will have to be recognized that addressing the Cyprus problem head-on and now is, in present circumstances, only likely to make things worse, not better. Could Turkey be persuaded to drop that precondition? Well, that remains to be seen. Finally, a word about Ukraine and the implications of the conflict there for all Europeans. And I do very much welcome what the President said in his introduction to this conference about the importance that his government takes to implementing the EU sanctions, which are, of course, in very close harmony with what this country does and what the Americans do. This Ukraine issue surely is a critical one for all of us. Preventing the seizure of parts of the territory of a neighbouring country by force is at the heart of the Ukraine crisis, but it was also and remains at the heart of the Cyprus problem. That is why, so long as Russia's aggression persists, this is no time to allow other disputes to divide the united front that the EU and NATO have taken against that aggression. That's a challenge that all those three governments face, and it could perhaps lead to the search for better solutions to the sectoral problems to which I've drawn attention. Let's hope so. Thank you very much.